Good morning.
Good morning.
Please pray with me.
May the words of my mouth and the meditation of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. It seems impossible to me that 6 years have passed since Lanny and I returned from a cruise in the Holy Land. As I read the passages again from Luke's Gospel this morning, I returned to memories of that trip. With all the development that has taken place in these areas, it is difficult to imagine life as it was in the time of Jesus. But as we left Nazareth and drove around the shores of the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum, we were overwhelmed thinking about Jesus and his disciples traveling so much distance on foot. It is difficult to imagine walking that rocky, hilly, hot, dry terrain with whatever roads or paths existed at that time. This was a trip we took, not knowing anyone we would be traveling with. But as the trip progressed and we began to meet others, either at dinner or on one of our excursions, we soon found ourselves forming relationships with other people that we would have never met otherwise. A community of sorts was formed by circumstance. In the Gospel from Luke today, we hear the story of another community formed by circumstance, one that otherwise would have never come together. A community of lepers made up of 9 Jews and 1 Samaritan. We know that besides being a terrible physical illness, it was one that isolated those who suffered from society. But they had forgotten that there were Jews and Samaritans because they were bound together by their common need. The Torah regulated the treatment of lepers. They were told to put out of camp everyone who is leprous. And it required lepers to shout, "Unclean, unclean," to warn uninfected people to keep their distance. Leprosy was regarded not just as a medical condition, but also as a sign of God's judgment. This tended to make people less compassionate than they might have otherwise been, because they felt that the afflicted person had brought this misery upon himself by some sin they had committed. We know that lepers positioned themselves by the side of the road where people traveled so they could ask for charity. They probably shouted to everyone who passed by, asking for mercy. I would think that many people probably cast their eyes away so they didn't have to look at them. But we're told when Jesus passed by, they cried out, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." They know his name, and they address him as Master, a person of authority. If they've heard of Jesus' miracles, their plea is surely a request for healing. As they cry out for mercy, something changes because Jesus actually sees them. He looks at them. And that tells us that their cries were heard by God and that he recognized and was ready to give compassion and mercy. His words are simple. Go and show yourselves to the priests. And they all turned obeying his command, and somewhere along the way, on the road to obedience, all 10 are cured. But as they go, only one of them stops, overwhelmed by this unexpected gift of grace. And he runs back and throws himself down at the feet of Jesus in gratitude, praising God with a loud voice. The message is clear. God's love is boundless, and his grace is for everyone. I believe that all 10 were overcome with gratitude, thankfulness that now they would be accepted back into their families. They would again be able to worship in public. But as they moved forward to embrace the miracle, only one felt the need to run back and openly express his gratitude to God. Jesus asked, "Where are the other 9? Were they not healed?" But then Jesus says to him, "Rise up and go. Your faith has made you well." The Greek for "made you well" is different than the word for cure. To be made well was to be made whole, to be healed. He came back to offer his gratitude, and he received the fullness of the gift Jesus had to offer. That this one man is a Samaritan and not a Jew is probably the point that Luke is trying to make. For throughout his gospel, it is the outcast who recognize Jesus for who he is. The outcast is the one who sees and responds freely to the grace that he has experienced. 9 were cured. 1 was healed. True gratitude comes from within. The poor have much to teach us about being truly grateful. Many of us have learned from mission trips, whether they were to a foreign land, another state, or just across the city of Dallas to Austin Street Center. Or yesterday, when many of you shared in the Fresh Food Day and offered yourselves to whatever service you could be. And it's at those times when we serve in his name that we can hear and feel their gratitude to God. This is what Henry Nouwen learned when he left Yale Divinity School after teaching there for a decade, and he began to minister among the poor in Lima, Peru. In his book, Gracias, a Latin American journal, he writes, "Gratitude is one of the most visible characteristics of the poor that I have come to know. I'm always surrounded by words of thanks. Thank you for your visit, your blessing, your sermon, your prayer, your gifts, and your presence with us. Even the smallest and most necessary goods are a reason for gratitude. Not only are the poor grateful for life, but they also celebrate life constantly. A visit, a reunion. A simple meeting are always like little celebrations. Every gift is shared. Have a drink, take some fruit, eat our bread is the response to every visit I make. And this is what I see people do for each other. All of life is a gift to be celebrated, a gift to be shared." Those are powerful words that he wrote while serving others in a very poor area. I experienced this over and over when I traveled with a women's team to Uganda to put on a conference for African women from 5 countries. As we traveled around that area, I experienced people with very little offer what they had. Every time we went into a home or a church, we were asked to share whatever they had. Food, drink, they might offer a song or a dance. They would always take our hand in theirs, put their other hand on our arm, and say, "You are most welcome." And they meant every word. We felt it in our hearts and we felt it in our souls. It was a beautiful, genuine sharing and celebration. We can learn from them to celebrate life as a gift. When we're at our best, it is easier to notice blessings in simple, everyday occurrences. The laughter of a child, a beautiful sunset, safe travel through traffic, an unexpected act of kindness, a warm bowl of soup on a cold day, a disagreement resolved. At other times, we may find ourselves so caught up in routines, our thoughts consumed by situations that cause us anxiety, by what we feel or others' expectations, by envy, by jealousy. Those times we don't take time to think about the blessings that we've been given, much less about the giver. In our worship, it is easy for us to offer up names and situation when the time comes for prayers of the people. For those we know who are suffering and in need, we should be as verbal when we're asked to share our blessings, our thanksgivings. We need to be more aware, more open in our thanks for the everyday blessings we have in this life. Often we leave the singing of hymns and praises mostly to the choir, when we should be joining in and raising our voices loudly, even if we can't carry a tune, in praise and in thanksgiving for all that we have. On my trip to the Holy Land, I hoped for a more spiritual renewal. But as we maneuvered through those hot, crowded streets and visited beautiful churches built over historic sites, filled with crowds of impatient travelers jostling for positions where they could see a little bit better or be closer, approached on every side by people trying to sell us things, I found myself becoming more impatient, ungrateful, and complaining. As I reflect now, perhaps the lesson for me to learn is to look for the blessing beneath the surface, to look deeper, to actually practice gratitude. It was an amazing trip, and it was one that I continue to reflect on and learn from. Since we took that trip, so many things have changed and fallen apart in the Middle East, in the African countries. So much devastation, so much loss of life, families torn apart, children orphaned, fleeing for safety. It is overwhelming to try to understand how to help, how to overcome our own fears of safety as we try to understand how to help, as we try to live into our faith by responding to the call of Jesus to do whatever we can to ease the suffering of others. We can begin by being open and trying to reach out to help another whenever the opportunity arises. A good friend of mine just this week sent me a posting from Facebook that he found on Barb Churchill Coaching. I think it has great meaning because it reads, "Gratitude is a verb. It's a natural thought to be grateful for the helpful action of others, but it takes thoughtful gratitude to say thank you to those who bless our lives." If you take nothing else away from this sermon today, resolve to become more aware of God's continuing grace in your own life. On awakening each day, resolve to say thank you for the opportunities you will have that day to serve others in His name. Pray that He actually opens your eyes to see the needs of those around you. At the end of the day, before you collapse in tiredness, remember to find one blessing that you had today to thank God for. That's practicing gratitude. I leave you with this quote from Meister Eckhart, the mystical writer. "If the only prayer you ever said in your whole life was thank you, that would be enough." Amen.
Amen.